Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. What was the fastest way you saw someone get fired? Part 2. I arrived at the office of a factory that manufactures automobile parts approximately 10 minutes before 10 o'clock in the morning in order to begin cleaning the offices. I worked for a company that provided janitorial services, and my shift included the hours of 10 to 11 o'clock. It had been a sufficient amount of time that I'd been there that I was on good terms with everyone. The newly hired employee arrives only 2 hours late to the office. The company anticipated that employees would be present at 8 in the morning. This is the first strike. His response to the manager's decision to provide him with a uniform was as follows. "You're only paying me $8.25 an hour and you expect me to wear this S? It's unattractive and you are not paying me enough to wear that attire. Get a second strike." To add insult to injury, it's not like they wanted him to dress up as a D in a purple costume with lime green S fringe. Can get them filthy and nobody cares. Put your dirties in a bin and the launderer will bring them back clean. Work clothes consisting of a dark blue shirt and dark blue pants that are part of the uniform. There's no embellishments on these garments. Subsequently, the manager introduced the newly hired employee to their direct supervisor who serves as the facilitator between worker and management. She was the first person who ever paid me for working. I mowed her yard when I was 11 years old, and I happened to know the supervisor quite well. In fact, she was the owner of the business. Her? You are completely insane if you believe that I'm taking orders from an S. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, but I will never allow another snob to be in my life and dictate my every move throughout the day. As a result of the fact that I have a mother and a grandmother, I decided to take this job in order to escape it. There's a man in this area, he has the potential to be my supervisor. The fact that the S in question was the manager's sister may have been something that I failed to mention. That is going to be a big, juicy strike 3, and you're going to be out of here. Took a quick look at my watch. It was 10 minutes past 12. Even now, I'm unable to comprehend it. As far as I can tell, it must have been some kinda you've got to find a job or else deal, and he was planning to play the I was willing to work and they mistreated me and fired me unjustly pity party. That is my theory. Or perhaps he was just a moron. Could have been the old classic, a little bit of both options. That's less than 15 minutes, and it's possible that this will go down in history as the longest he ever worked anywhere with his attitude record. In my case, the individual who was terminated did not lose his job, and although it took a few weeks, it was one of the most remarkable examples I've ever witnessed. I am employed in the coffee industry. This individual came into the shop claiming to be from a different store located in a different city. He had a lot of charisma, and he did quite well in the interview. Consequently, he was hired right away. Thing is, once he started working, it became questionable not only whether he worked at a different store, but even if he had ever previously worked in the coffee industry at some point in his life. The guy was constantly breaking health code. He didn't know how to make drinks. He didn't know how to use the coffee grinder. He didn't know what settings they should use for specific brew methods, and he didn't know how to make a pour-over. In addition to that, he did not clean up after himself. He once refilled a cinnamon shaker and left dusted cinnamon all over the counter with the full cinnamon tub open and the spoons he just left in the tub. He also left the spoon in the open tub himself. And once he came in on his day off and asked for a free pastry, then ate half of it and left it on the counter when he left the store without saying bye to anyone. In addition to that, there was a time when he ground a customer's coffee primarily on the counter, then immediately after that, he asked if he could take the remaining coffee home, noting that we would not be able to sell the coffee that he had destroyed. To put the cherry on top of it all, he would come in every single day with a new dramatic story about his roommates and the crazy S they would get into. For example, it turned out that the person with whom he signed the lease didn't actually live there, and then they broke down the door because he locked it and they didn't have a key to get back in. In any case, after a few weeks of working for the company, he informed his employer that he needed to take a few weeks off because he needed to take care of some personal matters. The supervisor made sure that everyone was okay by asking questions such as, was it just me, or was that guy kind of a terrible employee? It was unanimously agreed by all of the employees in the store. However, when he stated that he was prepared to return to work, my manager was not inclined to receive his return. I think we found out only later that maybe he had only worked one day at the other store in the other city. I can't remember at this point. A little over a week. Should be noted that this was a professional position requiring a master's degree. She relocated across the country and was even given a reasonable moving stipend to help her on her journey. She started slacking off and not doing her work within the first day of the job in question. After taking her lunch break at her desk, she would eat and then she would leave the office for 1 to 1.5 hours after returning. She gave a response that was something along the lines of, I ate while working so it's fine, when she was questioned about this matter. She had just started and she did not have any work at the time. I was her supervisor and we were both participating in the training session. The company covered the costs of our in-person training that took place on Friday and Saturday of that particular week. Her arrival on the first day was approximately 1 hour late. It was approximately 2 hours before she left the training session. In addition to myself, there were 2 other coworkers present at this training. She explained to each of them that she wanted to leave early, but she did so in a different way. However, before she finally left, she sent me a text message to let me know that she had to leave in order to go to a daycare center for her child in order to enroll them to attend. The school had already closed by the time this occurred, which was around 5 o'clock. In addition, while she was participating in this training, which was attended by other professionals, medical professionals, and attorneys, she removed her shoes and began picking at her feet within the context of a breakout session for a small group in front of everyone. There was no desk or table in front of us, and we were seated in a circle amongst one another. As soon as the owner's wife confronted her about her behavior the following business day, she immediately referred to her as a B and said, "Whatever, I didn't do any of that." I was her supervisor at the time, so I was there to witness everything that happened. I still had the text messages and pictures of her picking her feet I had taken at the time. In the end, she was not only unable to keep the job for which she relocated across the country, but she was also required to repay the moving stipend. And the school that she mentioned having to visit, well, it was the same daycare that my son attended, and I verified that she never had an appointment with them on that particular Friday or any other day. It's a story that's not particularly exciting, but it's perplexing to me that someone would relocate across the country for a job and then mess up so quickly. Why do your neighbors and or your HOA have such a bad reputation? Part 2. My HOA held an election that was not honest. Using an old set of rules, the current president let some people have more than one vote, which meant that they would vote for him. The HOA were sued, and the judge said there would be no more elections until the case was over. I just learned that the county has the money to pave the gravel roads, but they're waiting because they're being sued. That was 5 years ago. Now I'm getting letters telling me I need to pay my part of the $60,000 in lawyer fees the HOA has racked up while defending themselves. There's a pee-off between the new board and the old board, and I'm in the middle. Anyone want to buy my house now that all this crap's going on? It's like, hey, come buy my house and enjoy the possibly endless lawyer fees you might have to pay. This is a story about how local government can actually work for you. I live across the street from some major C's. The point at which my house comes to an end is also the point at which the residential zone comes to an end. There's a commercial zone directly across the street. The jerk who owns that company is actually advertising on his website that he's a baron and that his wife is a baroness with the intention of attracting customers. He's someone I like to refer to as Baron von F-Stick. In any case, F-Stick leased a portion of his property to a group of fat A's who sell low-carbohydrate food that's disgusting. They'd been there for a couple of years when, all of a sudden, a massive food storage unit that resembled a train car found its way onto their property. It was also very loud, extremely loud, and it was operational around the clock. Even though there were a lot of other noises during the day, wasn't that bad. When night fell, however, it was the worst. Just about every 20 minutes this contraption would start up. In the beginning, I went straight to F-Stick and lodged a complaint. She pointed me in the direction of the fat a-holes who owned the low-carb establishment. This guy couldn't give a D about anything. I made a phone call to the city. In addition, the inspector came out and carried out some tests. Based on his findings, it was determined that the volume was not sufficiently loud for them to get into trouble. On the other hand, he did mention that he would look into their permits. Nothing ever came about that. As a result, a considerable amount of time passes. Every single night, I find myself overflowing with rage and attempting to devise methods by which I can detonate this device or their place of business without being caught. I couldn't actually come up with anything. After that, they have the audacity to begin marking parking spots on the street and putting up signs that stated they would tow vehicles if they became parked there. Not only during the hours that businesses are open, but at all times, regardless of whether or not they were present. Although the signs did not contain any penal codes, etc., I was aware that this was a violation of the law. My friends and acquaintances, including the police, advised me to get in touch with the member of the city council who represents my neighborhood. This was something I had never done before. In theory, politicians are supposed to be there for the people they represent, but I never really believed that to be the case. I made the call. There were affable persons. In addition to providing an explanation of the situation, I also brought up the cold storage unit for good measure. It was investigated by them. All of a sudden, the red tow signs vanished. After that, they informed me that there was going to be a hearing regarding the cold storage unit. Baron von F-Stick had already been fined and hadn't paid those fines, and if he didn't remove the D-thing, a lien was to be placed on his property. Oh, I was overjoyed. Is it possible that the conclusion is drawing near? And then one day, a large vehicle that was designed for towing arrived and yanked that little piece of garbage storage unit out of there. I am once again able to enjoy peace and quiet. Perhaps I have the most qualified member of the city council in the entire United States. I will be voting for him in every election that will take place in the future. I was a resident of a condominium complex, and one of my neighbors was a squatter. He was able to get away with it because this occurred during the most severe phase of the housing bubble meltdown. For those of you who are unaware, a squatter is a person who begins to claim ownership of a vacant home after breaking into and occupying it. Regardless, if that was the extent of his criminal behavior, then it's not my problem and it's not a big deal. The issues arose as a result of the fact that he was a major jerk and a liar who had achieved a great deal of success. Below is a brief list of reasons why I hope he develops cancer of the A. Despite the fact that he had 6 vehicles, including a brand new Corvette, Mercedes-Benz V12 Custom, dually pickup truck, Lexus Coupe, and a couple of others that I don't remember, he squatted for free in a unit, had a sister who was receiving Section 8 housing, government-subsidized housing, and he took every single visitor spot on the property with his D cars. After receiving complaints from individuals, he began parking his vehicles in spaces that belonged to apartments that were available for purchase. At the time of the purchase, the individual claimed that the units were his own. Other than washing his cars on a nearly daily basis, he did not have a job that he could reasonably call his own. In spite of the fact that these condominiums had attached garages, he allowed his vehicles to run inside his garage, causing carbon monoxide to flow into the units, and he ignored complaints. Because he tore off all of the numbers and identifying marks that were on his apartment and the apartment of his neighbor, he was able to avoid being evicted. 2 different real estate companies were selling the same unit at one point, and they didn't even realize it until they were about to close on the transaction, at which point everything went awry. Due to the fact that he changed the numbers on all the units, one of the real estate companies mentioned above spent $20,000 on the rehabilitation of the incorrect unit. By rigging the meter boxes with frickin' jumper cables, he was able to obtain electricity without paying for it. After the fire department arrived and shut down his jump box setup, he broke into the garage of a neighbor and ran extension cords across the parking lot in order to power his unit. Because of all of the aforementioned reasons, I was a member of the HOA and I worked very hard to get him out of the house. Despite the fact that it took me a considerable amount of time, I eventually filed a lawsuit against him. I won. In order to pay the fines and court fees, he was forced to sell all of his expensive automobiles. Once and for all, that jerk has been permanently removed from our neighborhood. If you want to watch the part 1, click the link here. I'm very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.